Today should be a momentous day in the 41st millennium and in the hobby. The Lion's return is going to send ripples throughout the galaxy, and it gives us a really cool other player in the galactic Game of Thrones. It also helps that the model is drop dead gorgeous. When I first saw it revealed, I knew that I wanted to do something special with it, and when GW said they were sending me the Lion and Retinue set, I was super keen to get into it. I'm going to add the Lion to my collection of Angels of Redemption, a Dark Angels successor chapter that specializes in hunting the fallen. I have no idea if that will even be a thing now that the Lion is back, but in any case, they have this really cool halved green and bone color scheme that I want to try and paint on the Lion. So first things first, let's get the Lion built up through the power of editing. Size-wise, he's obviously a lot bigger than even the character Space Marines like Helbrecht. He towers above most of the other Dark Angels models in my collection, and he's even taller than his brother Guilliman. Angron is obviously much bigger than him, but the Lion still looks like he could put up a fight. As I said, I have a collection of Angels of Redemption, and I think whilst it would have been fine to have Lionel in his standard colors working with my guys, I thought if I could update and refine my scheme on him, he would look really cool in that halved green and bone. It's been a few years since I've really painted any Angels of Redemption, and my painting has moved on a bit, so I wanted to really rethink how I painted these colors. I started with the black undercoat, even though there's some quite bright colors on the model. Because it's split, I felt like the black gave me the most solid base coat for all of the colors that I wanted to do. How much of each side to paint before attempting to do the halving is always a conversation if you're painting this kind of scheme. On the Lion, I decided to paint all of the green first, and then just be really careful when doing the split. But if you're painting an army of these guys, I would probably do the base coats of both colors first, and then move on to the other stages, as otherwise you'll be required to be really neat. The green was painted with a few layers of Caliban green, and then an all-over wash of Nuln oil. Once this was dry, I used Caliban green again to re-establish the base coat, before adding in some Warpstone glow for the first glaze layers, and then straight Warpstone glow as highlight, and finally Moot green as an edge highlight. This is basically the standard Dark Angel green recipe. It's tried and true and very effective. The key parts are just making sure that your Caliban green base coat is super solid and that your layers don't jump up too much. Caliban green, Warpstone glow and Moot green are very different from one another, so having some intermediate layers, mixing them together can really help make your painting smoother. For the bone parts, I started with Morghast bone. I've used a variety of bone colors on these models in the past: Sandry Dust, Baneblade Brown, Rakarth Flesh, and others. Morghast bone is new and it has a really nice bone color that contrasts with the dark green. It's quite warm compared to something like Rakarth Flesh or Baneblade Brown, and I did need a few base coats to cover the black. Then I did an all-over shade with Seraphim Sepia, and once that was dry, I went in with Seraphim Sepia again and did a recess shade. I glazed back Morghast bone, and then I edge highlighted with Ushabti bone to finish it off. And whilst I did take my time with these, neither of the recipes for these main colours are particularly taxing. There's just a couple of edge highlights and a couple of recess shades. So if you're painting an army of Angels of Redemption, it should be fairly easy to do these steps across your force. So one tip I do have when painting a split scheme is to always try to follow the lines of the model. Lionel has a really nice set of armour that kind of comes to a point in the middle, making it really easy to find where the splits should be. Everywhere except on the backpack. On the backpack, I just had to use the visual features of the model to guide where to make the split. If you are not sure, I would err on the side of having it look correct rather than being correct. So though on the Lion here, I did follow the movement of his torso, so that if you look straight on, the line does not appear to be in the middle. If you're doing an army, I would basically make it so that even if, their head's slightly turned or the torso is slightly turned, the line still splits half and half. The more you paint, the easier it'll get, and you can always hide the roughness of any splits using your accent colors, any gold details on the armor, etc. At the end of the day, for most painting, people are going to be looking at it across the table, and the important part is to have two equal sides of color rather than the neatness and the accuracy of the split. When you do have a split scheme, it's really important to get your accent colors right, because not all colors will work. If the armor was just green, I could use maybe a cream or a bone cloth. If it was bone, I could maybe paint a green cloth. But as I already had both of those on my model, the other colors really needed to complement the scheme, but not make it too busy. I went for a white cloth for most of the robes, and then red for the outside of the cape. The other colours on the model are just simple: silver, gold, brown. Keeping these dark and muted, I think, brings out the pop in the armour. So speaking of the white, I started with a base coat of Grey Seer, followed by 2 to 3 coats of Administratum Grey. When that was looking solid, I used Nighthaunt Gloom Contrast as a shade, which gives me a really nice bluey grey in the shadows. I thinned it slightly in some places. I then layered or glazed back on Administratum Grey, and then I edge highlighted with White Scar. The base of this model is quite busy. I wanted to follow a similar technique to the one I used in my Helbrecht model and paint the base quite muted in order for Lionel to stand out. The slap chop method will really contrast as well with the fairly neat edge highlighted model, so you can think about that as another form of contrast. Yes, you can contrast in the colour, but you can also contrast in the technique and the texture. So I started with a few dry brushes of various grey and white paints, and I slap chopped a variety of contrasts sort of randomly over the whole thing, greys and browns. When these were dry, I dry brushed brown and bone onto the ground, and then I painted the attendant watches in the dark. I used fairly standard colours to paint these, but then I shaded all over them with Black Legion contrast paint thinned down, which lends them a quite muddy, muted look. With the base done, all that was left to do was to assemble Lionel and see if all of my colour choices come together well. Painting in sub-assemblies means that sometimes that's a little bit of a leap of faith, because you have to see right at the end, does this all pulled together? Unfortunately, in my opinion, I think they really did. The Lion was a wonderful project. Having such a big, important model meant that it was easy to justify taking a bit of time on him, and the sheer scale of some of the details made painting a lot easier and more fun than painting something smaller. Don't know where my Angels of Redemption army will go in 10th edition, but they have a fantastic leader for them if I do feel like updating the army. I hope you found some of these tips useful painting your Lion, even if you're not doing the same split scheme. If you're painting something else, I think the bone and the green are both really cool colours. Let me know in the comments which Primarch you'd like to see come back next, as well as what you thought of my model, and I will see you in the next video.